welcome back to Pod Bros. Today's episode's topic is how did ideological conflict shape international relations after World War II?
And to what extent is resistance to liberalism justified?
To find that out, we're going to have to travel way back to the mid-1900s. But first, make sure you subscribe to Pod Bros for the broest podcast out there.
Hey Acadia, why did Stalin cross the road? To get communism to Western Europe by expansionism.
First, we'll look at expansionism. This began after the Potsdam Conference in 1945, when the USSR was expanding communism into Western European countries. Stalin saw this as a major way to take control.
Whilst using Eastern European countries as a buffer zone between the two.
A buffer zone?
Sort of like a safety net, protecting the Soviet Union from attacks from the West.
Oh, I see. So this was Stalin's form of keeping himself and his nation safe.
Exactly. Acadia. Knock knock.
Who's there?
Truman.
Truman who?
Truman's here to stop communism from spreading to the rest of Europe because, on the other hand, there was containment, which was the opposing view to expansionism.
The U.S. was very opposed to communism, as it directly went against many liberal and democratic values that they held so dearly.
So containment was how they did it. Trying to limit the communism being spread to other countries by the USSR in order to promote democracy in now war-torn countries.
These opposing ideologies brought the Cold War to constant brinkmanship, a process characterized by punishing a dangerous conflict to the tipping point, where it is moments away from ending in disaster.
One of the biggest forms of brinkmanship was the Cuban Missile Crisis in 1962, where, in a very brief summary, a U.S. trade embargo and a failed invasion of the CIA after the Cuban Revolution of 1959 resulted in Cuba asking the USSR for assistance. The USSR brought them nukes, the U.S. found out, and all was almost lost when a submarine mistook depth charges for the start of nuclear war.
If it weren't for the commander of the submarine flotilla, Vasily Arkhipov, voting against the nuclear torpedo being launched from the submarine, the Cold War would have been a lot less frigid. Well, the agreement for the U.S. to pull nukes from Turkey in order for the Soviets to pull nukes from Russia also helped too, I guess.
Brinkmanship is often compared to a game of chicken, seeing who will tip over a breaking point of mass destruction first. This constant back and forth led to what we now know as deterrence.
By definition, deterrence is a strategy of holding people back from doing something by instilling fear or doubt in them. A simple example is telling people there are sharks in the water before they swim in it. But in this case, it was about nuclear weaponry.
The USA and the Soviet Union both knew they had immense power, and they knew that if one fired, the other would fire back, only causing more destruction, thus deterring them from starting conflict.
MAD was the acronym used, Manual Assured Destruction. It explains itself. It was fear of the other country retaliating stronger or equally as strong to your original attack, leading to complete destruction overall.
Deterrence, however, was different from détente, a relaxation of conflict and tension between the major powers of the US and the USSR.
The US was economically drained from the Vietnam War, and the USSR was equally drained from the massive military spending. So tensions died down, and they tried to work on recovery.
Speaking of the Vietnam War, proxy wars were constant during the time of the Cold War. The Vietnam War was one of them, where northern Vietnam was backed by communist powers and southern Vietnam was backed by the US.
However, due to citizens in the West protesting the war by burning draft letters and creating uproar about how it wasn't the Americans' fight, as well as large death counts that could have been avoided if they hadn't joined the proxy war, the U.S. pulled out of the war.
Like Vietnam, proxy wars were designed to have the USSR and the US fight indirectly by backing communist and democratic sides of the war. This continued the Cold War and its conflicts without having the two sides directly attacking each other. Other proxy wars happened throughout the Cold War as well, like the Korean War, the Greek Civil War, the Congo Crisis, and more.
There was also spying, of course. In the 60s, an American spy pilot was captured by the Soviets, who was flying a plane called the U-2. The U-2 was a model plane designed to take pictures as it flew. making it easier for the US to know what the USSR was up to without truly going to their country.
Spying and espionage was consistent during the Cold War and often had spy trades between the two major powers.
Another consistent trend throughout the Cold War was non-alignment, where countries wouldn't side with either the US or the USSR in order to move the conflict closer to peace.
During the war and nearing the end of it, many liberation movements were occurring within the US and USSR's people. One of the biggest liberation movements for the Cold War was tearing down the Berlin Wall.
This removal of the largest symbol of Cold War was not only signified as the end of the war, but also showed how people liberated themselves from the communist power that put the wall there in the first place.
Hence it being called a liberation movement. So how does this show us the ideological conflict after World War II and how it shaped society? How much can someone resist liberalism after we've seen what happened in the Cold War?
Well, people had very different views on how the world and their countries should function after the war.
And the conflict between expansionism and containment,
amongst other things,
are polar opposite ideas that can be taken to the extreme when taken across the world like it was in the Cold War.
And resisting liberalism was the goal of the Soviet Union, as it tried to expand communism to other European countries. But in the end, Gorbachev, the last leader of the USSR, implemented more liberal ideas about the economy and the society of his country.
So maybe rejecting some aspects of liberalism isn't a bad idea, considering how much progress the Soviet Union made in technology and many other aspects.
Just don't take it as far as Stalin and Khrushchev did. And maybe don't start an almost nuclear war in the US.
Thanks for watching, and don't forget to hit that bell for more episodes of
Pod Bros! Of Pod Bros! We called the U2. Like the band! You don't like U2, do you, Mr. Girton? I don't know why, but I heard that one day during class when I was actually paying attention. I'm not going to put that in the video, though. Sorry, Mr. Girton. The U2 was a model flotilla. Hurricane Tortilla, more like Hurricane Flotilla. This began after the Potsdam episode. This topic. Oh boy. If it weren't for the commander of